Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Avorion episode 54. I'm Enigmius, and today I had promised a blueprint, and I'm going to have to disappoint you for an episode. Unfortunately, if you saw the message that I sent out saying that the blueprint would be this episode, I got mired in a bunch of stuff that just takes a really long time. There's no way that I can rush it, and the plan that I have that I'm working through is manageable. The layout took 5 hours, just to give you an idea, just to get it set up the way that I wanted, so that now the building part will be much faster than if I hadn't done the layout, but it took some time. So I decided to show you what I've got here in terms of what I did on the underside of the station, if you want to call it that, station being stationary. We have the top and the sides and the underside, and this is the underside. Realistically speaking, I didn't have to do anything on the underside. What we're adding now is not necessarily so much functional as it is aesthetic, although it will provide a little bit of protection to the hangar, depending on what angle we're being attacked from, the approach of the enemy ships. Having a little bit of extra dimension sticking down has the potential to block the occasional shot that would have otherwise gone straight to the hangar. I doubt it's really that much of a concern with the structural integrity fields and the shields. You never know. Realistically, I just thought it looked really odd to have the bottom of the ship flat, like absolutely flat, the way that it was, given that everything else is absolutely round. There was really not much debate in my mind that I had to do something here, but it was a question of what I was going to do, recognizing that we're kind of already at the limits of what the game is willing to allow us to do based on the block count and all of the odd behaviors that we're already seeing in build mode as a result of the block count, which I was looking at it earlier, and it's, I think, just upwards of 70,000 blocks at this point. Quite a lot. Quite a lot. That number will come down when we get the ship all complete, and then we can merge a number of the blocks, but it's still going to be well over 50,000 blocks for the completed count on the station. The whole idea for me of having a ship or a station that pushes the limits of what the game can manage in terms of performance and being playable when it's done is that it's not worth it if we push it too far, and there's kind of a balancing act here. The computer that I game on and that I use for making videos is fairly robust. It's not cutting edge technology, but it pretty much was when I built it about a year and a half ago. I've got plenty of RAM, I've got a good video card, I've got a very good, very reasonable processor, and all of the bits in between support a pretty reasonable level of performance. So if I'm encountering difficulties with the game, with my machine, the concern is people with older machines might be kind of limited in terms of what they can expect and what the game will allow them to do if they've got this station spawned and in place. So I've decided what I'll do for the blueprint, which I promise and I'm certain will be the next episode, is I'm actually going to do two blueprints. I'm going to do one that's the station as it sits in essentially its miniature version for people who want to just kind of mess around and have fun with it, or maybe who want to rescale it to be just a little bit larger but not a whole lot larger. Having it start off small and then scale it up means fewer resources necessary to initially build this station and then scale it up, as opposed to giving you the full-sized, or what I would consider to be the full-sized station, having to invest all the resources and then scale it down. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but one way is a little bit easier to get started with as opposed to the other. So that's what I'll do. There'll be two blueprints, the miniature version and, like I say, what I consider to be the normal version, which will be scaled up, and the goal will be to have, from that increase in size, a reasonable amount of cargo capacity, a reasonable amount of crew capacity, computer capacity, all of the things that when we make them bigger will give us more stuff. is probably the way that we could describe it and get away with it. In the grand scheme of things, I don't know necessarily how good this station would be later on as we progress farther towards the middle of the galaxy, but in terms of a station that I can plant sort of in the middle, if you're looking at it in terms of the distance between where you start and the center of the galaxy, probably around in the middle, and depending on the weapons that we have available when we attach them to the station, plus any other ships that we have around it to help defend it, it should be okay. Like I said, once we get the station done, the next ship that we do will be a carrier, and then we'll be doing a bunch of similarly themed ships that will be support ships for that carrier. So basically, we'll have a carrier support group, to borrow the contemporary term. We'll have the carrier obviously will have a significant amount of hangar space and will rely primarily on fighters for its dirty work, whereas we'll have some other ships that are more about the onboard turrets and torpedoes, and we'll have probably a freighter of some kind in and amongst that, so that we have access to that when we're in our adventures. I noticed, and I don't even know how recent this was added, but there's now an RTS mode in the game where you can press F9 and you get like almost like an overhead map view, if the map was 3D, that you could zoom in and out, so that you can give orders to your various different ships, the things that you own, and give them instructions to interact with the various different things in the system, like shoot this guy, go dock at this station, etc. Or at least I did a very, very cursory look at it and kind of got a general idea for what it's about. I think it's a really cool idea. If you're talking about taking it from managing a single ship, flying around, doing whatever it is you want to do, and then creating a fleet and managing that fleet, it's a really good idea to have that sort of macro level interaction that allows you to control things fluidly, as expeditiously as possible and with the broadest view possible, so that you can make tactical decisions based on things that aren't necessarily visible to you when you're restricted to the view from a single ship. So I'm kind of interested to see how that's going to play out and how well done and how useful it's going to be. Like I say, for all I know, it's been there since the game was first released in early access, and I'm just getting to see it now. But for me, it's new, so we'll be taking a look at that as soon as we get to that point. So you may have noticed that I'm not really talking a whole lot about what specifically I'm doing with this underside portion of the ship, and that's because, to be absolutely honest with you, in my personal opinion, I didn't find this part to be all that interesting. And it's not that I was kind of half-assing it. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and I started to do that, and then we got to the point where things weren't lining up and we had to make some adjustments. And I always have to make the decision between saying, okay, well, some people will appreciate me just skipping this part and showing you a picture or a very, very brief video segment about the end results. Other people kind of resent the idea that I was building, and then I made the decision to deny them an opportunity to see what went into the process. In this case, I had the footage. It's been a few days since the last video went up, and it made sense to me to at least offer the people who are interested an opportunity to see what was going on here and have at least some sense of what went into the completion of the underside of the station. And then for the people who aren't especially interested in this, the next video will be a little bit more that I can discuss the actual build process and some of the things that were necessary in order to do what I needed to do. I kind of decided in my head that this station is going to look very, very similar to what you would get if R2-D2 and Saturn had a baby. That's kind of like the way that it looks in my mind. We've got the underside is nearing completion. We're kind of getting things lined up. We're getting things sort of finished and fleshed out. And then the top side is basically going to be a dome that's comprised of a bunch of different layers. And I mentioned this previously when we were talking in one or two episodes ago about trying to keep the block count down without sacrificing the end result, what I had in mind, the overall profile and the shape of things. And then it just sort of came to me as I was working on it, having seen the underside, the way that it turned out. And like I say, it was perfectly flat before, and now we're just kind of fleshing it out. We're adding some dimension. But the top side, just basically stacking circles on top of one another, and each circle is a little bit smaller than the one previously, and it's done in a way so that they're sized so that when you look at the stacks from the side, it actually creates a half circle kind of dome shape. And that's the gist of where we're going with that. It takes a lot less in terms of blocks to do something like that than it would have been to do what I had originally had in mind, which would be a complete dome, which would have been very, very time consuming to build, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It would have required a great many blocks more than what I'm doing now, and it would also be a lot easier to point out the flaws, the way the geometry can't line up perfectly in order to create a shape as complex as an actual hemispherical dome. So we have a little bit of both. We have there's going to be no denying that there's circles involved, and that they're going to be circles on multiple different planes that are intersecting with one another, but we aren't going to have to do all of the joining and making the seams line up as best as we possibly can over the entire full structure of a dome like that. So we'll have something that is reminiscent of that shape without all the time and without all of the extra blocks that are necessary. Still going to be a lot of blocks, don't get me wrong. We kind of shot ourselves in the foot at the very beginning of this project, as I was mentioning, when we started doing the layout and not even really thinking about what it would do to the block count when we have circles that are 600 and some odd blocks in diameter. And then you do the math, which I haven't done, and just to be honest, I'm not going to do, to figure out how many cubes worth of circumference that translates to, and then you spread it out over the full structure of the ship and all of the different things that we had to fill in and all of the different faces that we had to cover and all those other things. It should have been pretty clear to me that we were going to be really pushing it with the block count, but I was just thinking in terms of what I wanted the station to look like. The next build, believe it or not, I will actually be thinking in terms of block count as well as, or as a part of the overall design of the ship. It doesn't make sense to me that we would have a small carrier. It's one of those things you kind of expect a carrier to be quite large, but at the same time, we're kind of learning. We want to be a little bit more thoughtful about how many curves and how many compound curves we have involved in a particular design, not from the challenge standpoint, not from how difficult it might be to make it all work, but just simply now knowing there is a limit to what we can do before the ship becomes too complex and it becomes too unwieldy to really manage. So we've got a couple of minutes left here, just showing you the last little bits. One of the things that was really important to me for this particular part of the ship was to have some sort of light blocks, just to kind of match the theme that we've got going on elsewhere on the ship, and also because, as you may have already noticed throughout this process watching this video, the underside of the ship is pretty dark when there's not a lot of light shining directly on it. And I just find that it really helps visually to kind of highlight what we've done if we have a little bit of light that can shine off of the various different things that we've added, so that they've got a little bit more substance when you look at it than this sort of shadowy mass. And it's not until you get right up close to it or you get a completely different light source that you actually see that there are distinct shapes attached to this particular part of the station. So we're going to carry on. Like I say, this episode here is just about this underside and getting it all taken care of and squared away. I'm going to be moving forward at a much faster pace now with the top part of the ship. Now that the layout is done, we'll get that taken care of. We'll make the two blueprints. We'll show you how we did the top part. We'll show you the difference between the two different stations. And then you'll be able to mess around with your station while I get started on our carrier. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes in this and other series, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.